number 7. We're going to roll straight into this no intro video. New creative thing that we're going to add on to this whole curriculum thing. We're going to add on a daily shred. So we kind of, here at Akron, Coach Bowden is very big on faith, and we open up every staff development or our staff meetings upstairs with some form of a daily bread or some form of a devotion. So Coach Harris, my assistant, had an amazing idea to where we were going to do something similar downstairs, but in a strength conditioning realm. So we kind of talk about the Bibles of strength and conditioning, super training. The green Bible was a Torsky, and we kind of talk about how it's hard to digest all those at one time. So we're going to take pieces of them daily and meet as a staff on those. So that's what this is. We're gonna videotape our first episode of our daily shred here, and I'm gonna have Coach Harris tell you a little bit about it as we go through that. So, Coach Harris, tell us a little bit about your idea here, how you got it, and the whole 9 yards, Coach.
You want me to talk into the camera?
Yeah, I want you talking into the camera this time.
So one day I was just kind of sitting here thinking. I had some motivational things on the computer, and it just got me thinking like how important it is to fill your mind with positive things. And Coach Sleeve hits it over and over and over again. And this whole thing kind of leads up from a couple years ago when I truly found strength, and I started lifting, and lifting kind of dug me out of the hole that I dug myself into. And when I thought about it and how I got my life back to where I wanted to and ended up sitting in this chair in this office, it started with filling my mind with positive things. And then to put it all together, I asked Coach Sleeve a question how I could get better. He said, number 4 on his list was come up with a process to understand what you read and how you're going to absorb it. So I said, all right. And I brought this up to him maybe a month ago, and it just hit me like, just freaking do it and go after this thing and present it to the staff. And I think this is a great way to absorb information. This stuff gets pretty thick, and I mean, of course, you'll hear all of us say we don't know everything. And why not sit down in an environment and just talk about it? So take a section from a book. This section, the first one, kind of is something that we've been talking about as a staff, something that we're going to try ourselves when it comes to force and velocity and the relationships and how you can change the methods in which you train in order to get a more beneficial result instead of just going in and training one means in the weight room. So this is it right here, Daily Shred, episode 1.
Daily shred. Okay, so here's how we're going to work this. Like I said, I'm going to walk you guys through and let you kind of sit on our first one. Maybe we'll do some episodes where we do videotape this, but I want to give you an idea how we go through information when someone brings it up. So I'm going to videotape this first one, and then from here, I'm going to have Coach Harris kind of head this up. So anybody who wants to get, and what we'll do is we'll just create a email list. Which is going to be ironzips@gmail.com. So if you guys want to get in on this, I'm going to have Coach Harris kind of man that, and you guys just send an email to it, and we'll email you the daily shreds every day. So that's ironzips@gmail.com, and we'll put you on an email list, and then we'll just send these out to you every day. And then obviously if you guys have any questions on them or comments, or you want to add into kind of our conversations, we're more than happy to do that. So this is the first one, and I'm going to kind of let Coach Harris lead what it is, what the topic is, and then we're going to dissect it the way that we do. So sit back, enjoy. Let's roll.
All right. Look here, day 1. The title of this one is Strength is Never ... a Weakness.
Nice and loud, Coach. We got some music playing in the weight room here.
So basically, we know that strength is everything, right? We know that the foundation comes from it, but it's not always your answer. There's plenty of other things that go into it. It's not about just being able to squat 750 pounds. So this first subscription here, we're talking, I kind of compare powerlifting to what we do. And you guys read the little intro. I'll just kind of go through the introduction. We train athletes to compete in a sport that requires them to produce a great amount of force in a short amount of time. It's time dependent, whereas powerlifting, there's no time variable. They just have to sit down and stand up. It could take them 6 seconds to perform, in the geared lifting world, it could take them 6 seconds to perform a 1,100 pound squat. We don't have that luxury in football. So, for us, what it comes down to is the rate of force development. We've all heard it, we talk about it, we do it every day in our weight room. And it's a principle that I think, every strength coach in the country in the sport realm follows. You have to. So really, what I kind of talked about here is, an example, a lineman has to be strong, but they also have to be able, literally, on the snap of a ball, engage a defender and move them out of the way in order for the running back to get to where they got to go, right? Take that back to the powerlifting example. They don't have to do that. Yeah, they have a load on their back, but they don't have to get it out of the way. It's not on the snap of a ball. It's on them. Sit down, stand up, successfully, rack the bar. So we just kind of talk about, in both examples, it's similar, but it's not. They're both strong. Our offensive linemen are freaking strong dudes, but it's not all about being strong. They don't just have 700-pound back squats or 675-pound back squats. They can move fast. They can move, moderate weight pretty freaking fast too. So the first thing I talked about here was a quote from Science and Practice. To be a strong athlete does not mean to be a power athlete.
What are we reading, Coach? Just so people in the audience want to jump in here before we get too deep into this. Where are we?
We are reading Science and Practice of Strength Training. We're in chapter 5. And it's right about the middle of the chapter.
Page 156 through page 160.
All right, so he mentioned that to be a strong athlete doesn't mean to be a power athlete. We know that. We know what that means. Just because you're strong don't mean you're powerful. And we see it every day. And then I put the definition of strength, or Zatorsky's definition: maximal force that can be generated by a trainee in a given motion. Once again, what is that one missing? Like, what is that definition missing here? What we're talking about?
The time it takes.
Right. It doesn't mention anything about time. It just talks about just being strong. Just move the weight. In a squat, in a bench, in a deadlift, whatever it is. Even a max effort power clean could fall into that category. It's not as fast as you think it is. So for our interns here, what are the, this is kind of just a common knowledge thing that I think we all should know. What are the two underlying factors when it comes to developing strength?
Muscle mass and neuromuscular coordination, neurologically training.
Correct. Yeah. So the muscular adaptations and then the neuromuscular side. So structural, neuromuscular. That was just a quick overview, real quick, just to kind of get our minds going.
And that's a huge umbrella thing. So like, the thing you guys have to understand is, at the end of the day, muscles, her performance is really going to be enhanced with two main ways. And you guys will read 1,000 different books that give you 1,000 different kind of subtitles, but it all falls under two main umbrellas. At the end of the day, we can really change the way a muscle works from a cross-sectional area, which is what I term structural. So we can change the structure of the actin myosin. We can increase the size of the cross bridges. We can do those things. That's structural change. And then there's neuromuscular change, which is rate coding, synchronization, motor unit firing patterns. Those are really the only two ways, the main two ways. And then, like I said, you'll study and find a bunch of different pieces of that. That kind of fall into that realm with, increasing calcium that can go down to T tubules, with increasing, mitochondrial size, like I said, actin, myosin, like those, we can increase, but those are going structural. And then you can increase rate coding, how fast muscle fiber fires, how muscles fire together, synchronization, intermuscular coordination, intramuscular. You'll read all about all these different things. For me, it would have been, if I would have kind of been able to coin those as two separate areas, that would have been a lot easier off the jump when I started reading. So just whenever I kind of look at muscular adaptation, I always try to put them in one of those two categories. So, okay, is this exercise going to cause a structural or a neuromuscular? And obviously sometimes it's going to do both. But we think of just two main ways, which is what Coach saying: muscular, neuromuscular, neurological, in that nature.
All right, guys. So let's just, the point of this, when I thought about it, was, not to be right or wrong, not to be afraid to just ask your questions. It's something, is one of my weaknesses, is I don't ask enough. Maybe it's because I don't want to be wrong or look stupid or ask the wrong question. So that was another underlying motivation for something like this. So, let's just go through this first question, and we're just gonna throw it out there, and let's just talk about it. Throw out, we can go around, everyone say what they think it is, and then Coach Lee can bring us all together, Coach Sig can give his input, Coach Green, Coach Owens. Let's just let this be open and in a discussion. That's why that word's there at the end, discussion. So, what is the explosive strength deficit, and how does this information help you as a strength coach to determine the athlete's method of training? Discuss. So, Coach Folks, man, let's start with you.
Basically, what I said is it's too much emphasis on strength rather than worrying about, not rather than, but also including velocity, which in turn is power. Power is developed through force and development. Force and velocity, not just one or the other. And it touches on, and I believe it's obvious the way we kind of implement with our guys as far as rate of force development, how that has to be like the primary objective, especially when we have certain sort of athletes who maybe come from the background to where all they've done their whole life is maybe heavyweight training. So like they're very, very strong guys, but again, they're not powerful because they can move a heavy load, but they can't move it in a timely fashion. So that's basically what I got out of it.
What'd you get from it, Sophia?
Pretty much kind of like the same thing where it has to do with the strength themselves and the velocity and everything like that, and the power movements that they have, and that it's not, it all works together, and that it's the difference. The deficit is the difference between them, and you don't want too much of a difference because if they're not being efficient, and then they can overtrain or detrain, and then ruins the whole point of the entire workout. And so, what was the question again? Sorry. I just think it's important because it's good to know what your athletes are capable of doing and where they're at with their training. And so if you know their weaknesses or what they're capable of doing with their strength and their velocity and everything, you're able to go from there and progress. So.
What do you think, Dave, when if someone were to say, this athlete A that you're training is explosive strength deficit, what does that mean to you?
Well, this kind of goes back to, for me, like when we were talking about the guy from the velocity training from Missouri.
Brian Mann.
Yeah, Brian Mann, when he found out that guys, when they increase their power clean, with maximum weight on power clean, it didn't translate to increasing their vertical jump, which he thought would be, it would do it directly. So that's where the velocity-based training stuff comes in. So the explosive strength deficit, test whether or not is strength an issue or is it rate of force development is an issue. So if the issue is rate of force development, implementing plyometrics and the med ball work, things like that we do will help bring that up essentially.
Yeah. No, I think initially the first thing that I think everyone thinks about all right, the force velocity curve. And then I don't think we talk enough about the bare bones of, okay, what is force and what is velocity? Which if we don't do that, you can't understand any of those things of what the hell the force velocity curve is, what explosive strength deficit is, what muscular strength deficit is. You won't ever know those differences. So the first thing is understand force and Harris put that equation on there. It's how much it's how much of a load we can produce, and it's not time. It's just straight up how much of a load can you produce, and then velocity is now mass and acceleration, and it's how fast that we can move it, and it kind of obviously works down the curve as we go one or the other. So understanding just straight up what velocity is and straight up what force is allows you to kind of understand the difference. And then when you kind of look at the curve, I think the best way to think about when we talk about optimally training, which we'll get to, is you think about throwing three different objects. You throw a heavy ass shot put. You're going to produce a ton of force. You're not going to move very fast. It's not going to go very far. You throw a wiffle ball. You can throw it as hard as you freaking want, but at the end of the day, it's not optimal. It's not very heavy, so you're going to throw it super fast, but it ain't going to go very far. And then you have kind of the optimal, like a baseball. Yeah, you can throw that thing very fast. It's also weight is pretty good, so it's going to you're going to have to apply some force to it, and that's the one that's going to go the farthest. So we kind of think about that on the force velocity curve and how that moves, and then that kind of helps you coin what explosive strength deficit and muscular strength deficit is. So the easiest way to think about it is if explosive strength deficit is presented, then you have to train rate of force development. You have to not worry about training so much weight. You have to train rate of force development. If you have muscle strength deficit, you don't have to worry as much about the training rate of force development. You have to train max effort. You have to train max strength. So I think when you kind of partner them up like that, it really helps you understand what you're looking at, what's right in front of you, and makes you understand. Because obviously, being explosive strength deficit, okay, rate of force development, that means that I have a strong athlete that can produce force fast. If I have muscle strength deficit, I have an athlete can produce force fast, but they can't produce much force. And that kind of helps you understand the whole velocity curve as that kind of wiggles up and together.
Something else I thought of too, the article kind of mentioned it briefly. He didn't, I think it was on the last page. He also talked about force being a direction too. So like, and that's something we did this summer, Sophia. Unfortunately, you didn't get to see it much, but we implemented a lot more horizontal stuff. And I mean, I think the results spoke for themselves, but it was just, you have to think of it that way too, where it's not just force, how strong how much force am I putting, but in which direction am I putting the force when I want to go, to get to where I need to go.
And can my body be efficient at producing that force in the direction I want to go without bleeding force in 7 different directions? And it's all so many pieces that fall into that realm.
I just read that in the book, the Jumping the Flies too, how it's all about direction and everything like that too. It's just, I feel like a lot of coaches sometimes miss that because they just want them to be like strong and fast, like what you were saying. A lot of players all about like maxing out, like you were saying to Coach Slee the other day. It's all you knew as well sometimes. So yeah, I think that's also really important. But go ahead, sorry.
But one thing, like Sophia was asking questions when she was going through the reading and everything. I think there was one thing that we really, like Sleeve hit on it, but like we really have to know the difference that, the amount of force compared to the velocity. So I think the example I gave her, just like with the shot puts, you want to talk about force. Like we can come out here and deadlift 500 pounds or whatever. That 500 pounds is gonna move slowly. But say if you take that off and you put 100 pounds on that bar, that velocity, that meters per second is gonna go up. And it's just knowing the difference between the amount of force that you're putting in, the amount of velocity that you're also looking at as well. And also another thing is like really knowing the equation that, force equals mass times acceleration. And knowing that what we're talking about here is more of a continuum. And we want to get to the point to where we're training our athletes as optimal as possible, but knowing that when you get to that continuum, like when you're strong, you have to train explosively, and when you're explosive, you have to train strength, and knowing that strength is the precursor to everything. So that's a big thing with what we were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
I think I said that when I was trying to say what strength was. Did I say that?
I think you switched up a little bit.
Yeah.
I think you had the velocity switch with force equals mass times acceleration. Mass is high.
Strength is untimed is what I meant. I don't remember what the hell I said, but what I meant to say was strength is untimed. Force is mass times acceleration.
Yeah.
So how fast we can move the particular mass.
Yeah. So mass is high, acceleration is low. Acceleration is high, mass is low, vice versa, and it's always a continuum. There's always something going on, and there's always something that you can get better at as an athlete or as a lifter.
A question I had for everyone was, Sleep, with what we're going to do here in the next couple of weeks with our training, is there a ratio, or do you know of anything like how much? So let's just take someone like me who's kind of, I would say, we talked about force dominant, and then you're kind of at the opposite end of the spectrum with that. How much of it do you have to give? And then now if I take away some max strength work, am I going to lose that part of it as well? And you know what I mean? Like, is there, how much?
Yeah, I mean, obviously it depends on the athlete, but if you just train velocity, your force is gonna go down. You're not gonna be able to produce as much force. You're not gonna have as much max strength if you don't train it. But you have to train, at your weaknesses. So, if you have a perfectly balanced athlete, it's probably a different answer to the question, which we usually don't have perfectly balanced athletes. I think you're always trying to train one end of the perspective. And it's just like anything we talk about. It's like, what are you emphasizing? Just like in the summertime, like, we talk about our first emphasis is max strength. We're gonna try to get them strong, and then that's gonna switch to power output is the main emphasis in the second phase. But it doesn't mean that we're still not working lactic capacities. It doesn't mean that we're not working hypertrophy in some form or fashion. It doesn't mean that we're not working max strength. It's just what is your emphasis at that particular time, and then you have to treat that the same way with this. Like, you can't, if you just do 95% of rate of force development work, if you're exposed strength deficit, well then you're not doing yourself too many favors either. You still have to make sure you're continuing to keep your strength. I think that's a big part of it, is that sometimes we just ignore it completely. Oh, we're going to do all rate of force development. Well, then your strength is no longer going to be your strength at all. So I've heard numbers. I think I don't remember who I was listening to the other day, but he was actually talking about this. I think he said, like, if you can work up to like 80% of your main program stuff being this, as long as you got 20% of it still being your strength, it'll be enough to maintain it while you're working up. But that's not like from experience. I haven't used that number. I haven't seen that. I just remember hearing him say it. It was that Dr. Andy something. What the hell was his name?
Elton?
Yeah. So he was talking about it. But it sounds right. Yeah.
Do it for them. Anything else on that section? Any questions? Anything I missed? Any listeners?
I remember being like the lineman, the biggest thing was always like, all this dude's strong, but all those dudes always got dominated by the dudes that could just produce the force just so fast, and they were so much quicker off the ball. And it didn't even matter what the other dude was doing in the weight room, because they were just explosive, and they knew how to use it, and they knew how to dominate. But those dudes that had that ego, like, just, oh, I squat this, I do this. Well, yeah, but you move it so slow, and when you go on the field and it's still slow, it doesn't matter to you at all. So that's huge too. So like, even like the type of program that the football program is, you look at some skinnier, faster linemen, well, they get dominated by some bigger teams. But then you look at some bigger offensive linemen that are slow, and they just get dominated by linebackers and corners that are just blitzing. And then if you find out that happy balance, and they just dominate right off the ball, and then they can get to the front seven for the defense. So it's pretty crazy to watch, like from an offensive lineman's perspective, about how it actually works with the strength deficits.
And I think the big thing that we talk about here, and this is my philosophy, but I don't want to create strong or fast athletes. I want to create well-balanced athletes. So I talk about two different athletes. I talk about athlete A. Well, actually, three athletes. Athlete B, and then athlete AB. So athlete A is a guy that can squat 600 pounds. Okay. In the rack, but you look at him, and on the field he has explosive strength deficit. So this is your ESD guy. So he can produce 600 pounds on the squat, but when you ask him to go out and do the clap of the hands, he can produce 50% of that. Okay, so he's out there playing like a 300-pound squatter. Okay, then you have athlete B, whose max squat is 300 pounds, but he's super twitchy. Okay, so he has muscle strength deficit. So he can produce very limited force, but he can do it very quickly. So he can use all 300 pounds of that force while he's out there. Okay, so you got a guy that can squat 600 and a guy that can squat 300 that can use the same amount of strength on the actual football field. I don't want either of those guys. I want athlete AB who can probably squat about 500 pounds, and he's very explosive. Maybe can't improve all, but he can use 450 to 500 pounds of that in rate of force development. He's a well-balanced athlete. That's what I look at. That's what I want. I want this guy on my team, and that's from training a well-balanced program, from not doing too much rate of force development, not too much max strength, but having a well-balanced. And then one thing I really like about this section in the book is he gives examples of different force velocity curves and kind of how we can manipulate those. So you have force velocity curve, you have force, you have velocity on all of these. So if a guy can produce a ton of force, his force might be up here. He can't create much velocity. So once again, this is like an example of explosive strength deficit guy's force velocity curve. So his curve might look like that, like a kind of a weird fucked up curve. Okay, on the other end, you might have your muscle strength deficit guy who doesn't produce much force, can do it very quickly, and he's kind of got a curve that looks like this. And this is, and so as we progress those guys, you keep on, you just work velocity, you can improve velocity, and these numbers are going to continue to go here, and this curve can kind of even out, and vice versa. You can continue to work force and even these out. What I want to do is I want to train optimally. So, if we get a guy that's kind of a base level, doesn't have a crazy imbalance one way or the other, by training kind of right here in the middle, which is really like speed, strength, speed zone, we can kind of train here. We can really push out both ends of this. So if I keep on kind of training this zone and keep on improving this zone, it's going to push this line out. Zatorsky says that it can become a straight line. So the force velocity curve, it can become straight, but it can't become concave. So if I were to continue to train in these zones and keep bumping that line out, this line can't ever become concave in nature. The worst case scenario is becoming straight. So I know if that line on my force velocity curve, if I'm velocity profiling guys, okay, if I ever get to the point where I have a straight line, I keep on training optimally, I can really multitask and I can continue to increase my force and my velocity at the same time. And so that's why really when people ask me like, well, should I be training heavy here? Should I be training heavy here? And there's a ton of different points along the line. Like if you look at a force velocity curve, there's starting strength, accelerator strength, speed, strength, absolute strength, and that kind of is all up and down the different. It's training. So, well, what do I do? Do I program 3 lifts a day for each one? How do I do it? And that's honestly what my philosophy is if I stick kind of and train here and here and here and keep on training at these pieces, I'm gonna, worst case scenario, my guys' force velocity curves will get straight and they won't be curves at all. And then at that point in time, I can continue to increase force and velocity at the same time. Force and velocity at the same time. And that's kind of what my philosophy is. That's what I believe, and that's what we've kind of seen happen here is that, we don't necessarily train either end of the spectrum massively. We're not, this is your really light stuff. This is your really heavy stuff. We spend the majority of our time, like I said, kind of right in these middle zones. That's where we really try to spend the majority of our time training. And maybe not majority, but I'd say that's our main emphasis. I'd say they're more balanced than I would probably, and what I'm leading to right now. But that's kind of where we try to stay. And like I said, I believe that by doing that, we can continue to bump that curve out. And really multitask and get some force and velocity increase in recruitment all at the same time. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, sir.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Questions on that?
Do you
No
think
questions on that?
do you think it'd be possible? So like, say you take over a program and you take your developmental guys, and like, let's just say you could start them from square one, where like your guys that are forced, max strength deficit, you get them and you freaking just train kind of in this, speed strength zone. And you take those guys that are explosive strength deficit, and train them freaking heavy. Like, and then you just freaking, when they
Mesh
feed
them
into your
together.
program.
Yeah.
like
No,
us-
I mean, you definitely could. You kind of like feeder programs into it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's tough too because I think where's he talks about. Everyone if you especially talk to a lot of any old school book you read, it's all strength is kind of is the pillar of everything. Without strength, you can't have anything. And that's true. That's definitely not true. It's correct, but even Sowers on last week we were talking to him and he said if the strongest athletes in the world were also the most powerful athletes in the world, then everybody would be lining up at Louis Simmons' gym to take those dudes that are the strongest people in the world, but they can't move fast. They can't do it. So it kind of shows you that, you got to train strength, and strength is important, but even Zatorsky says here, I highlighted it. Where is this? Okay, so he says, comparing maximum force production with the maximum attainable force in the fast movement has proven to be a useful tool for planning training. The explosive strength deficit, parentheses, the difference between maximum strength and the force values generated during sport movement at takeoff, is too high, more than about 50%. Heavy resistance training directed towards the enhancement of maximum strength is not efficient. Maximum strength gains is of no value toward increasing the velocity. And that can lead me to my next thing I want to ask you guys is like, how strong is strong enough? So if we talk about football, okay? We're not training weightlifters, we're training football players. So let me reread this last piece. Heavy resistance training directed toward the enhancement of maximum strength is not efficient. Maximum strength gain is of no value toward increasing the velocity of the motion. And that's, like I said, that he's referring to if an athlete has explosive strength deficit. But at what point do we say, okay, this kid can squat 600 pounds? Isn't that enough? Like, isn't that enough? Do we need to keep loading more and more weight? Does this guy need to be doing 3 sets of 5 with 550 on his back? Like, isn't a 500 pound squat enough? Isn't a 550 pound squat enough? At what point do you take those guys that are 3rd, 4th, 5th year guys in your program and you just do a maintenance strength program to where we make sure we're not getting weaker, but we really just focus on making sure that our athletes can go out on their field and they can produce every freaking pound of that force. So if they can produce 500 squat rack, I want them to be able to play like they can produce 500 pounds in a squat rack. And if you emphasize that, like I said, you have to understand, you can't just stop squatting. If you stop squatting or stop doing max effort lower body training, what's going to happen? They're going to detrain, they're going to get weaker. But I'm saying if you were to set up a maintenance program for your 3rd, 4th, 5th, or just your guys that are freaking strong, that are strong enough, and you really had a more rate of force development, how fast they can produce that force, if that became the main emphasis of your program with those kind of guys, what would happen in your program? That's really what we emphasize here, and especially like I've told you guys stories about my stronger guys I've had, like Akeem Lawrence, Connor Hunley, James Turner, like those dudes, their sophomore years, I just looked at them, I just said, dude, what more, Connor Hunley squatted 650, power clean 364, 357 or something like that, and he was a over 400 pound bencher. So I was just looking at him and I just said, what, as a sophomore, what more do you need? You need a running back. And so I completely changed his program. And I'd say when he was doing all that, he was jumping like a 30-inch vert. He was running like a 4.640. And then when we switched his program, and I really just did all velocity-based stuff and hit a maintenance program with him, his vertical jump went up like 6 inches. His 40 went down to a 4.4 something. And so, that's just one guy, but what if we did that with the whole team?
Dude, I kind of love that question, because if you go through all the reading, it says, like, especially not Francis, but with Brzezinski, in order to start doing your plyometrics, you need to be, I want to say, hitting with your lower body lifts 2.5. 2 to 2.5 above your body weight. In order to start doing upper body plyometrics, you need to be hitting about 1.5 of your body weight. But when you actually look at athletics, and we say it all the time, we're not here trying to train weightlifters, or we're trying to train athletes. So when you look at the athletic side of things, do you really need to have 2.5? Maybe you go to double the body weight. Maybe you go to 1.7, 1.5 of the body weight. Maybe go to where they're bench pressing their body weight and try to go through the program that way. But the best thing about that equation that we can always get from it is that with mass and acceleration equaling force, at the end of the day, it really does, like, you're going to get stronger. You're going to get stronger whether you move heavyweight slow. We all know that. Everybody knows how to get somebody stronger. And you're going to get stronger if you're taking a set intensity and trying to move that shit as fast as humanly possible. So like one thing what we did with our NFL guys, where we're taking the tendos and we're going through their perceived exertions, and we're cutting them off when they get out of their zone. First of all, we're training them optimally, and they're only hitting the numbers and hitting that intensity that they need to train. But then on top of that, we're making sure that they're taking a high intensity and moving it at a high velocity, and we're doing that on weeks upon weeks upon weeks, and then they're able to recover faster because they're not going to have that set volume that we're going to put within their workouts, and they're taking all their nutrition, going through the chiropractors and going through our recovery modalities with yoga and all the other stuff that we present to them, and just knowing that they can get stronger by moving higher intensities faster or moving a set intensity faster. Like, that's really all you need. And it's not necessarily a maintenance program. It's just knowing the program, knowing the athlete, and knowing what level, what tier they have to be within their workout. And that's when, like, that's why I love our developmental program so much, because now we're taking that aspect of tiering our program and say, hey, listen here, you have to pass this shit before you go to the next level. Okay, now you have to pass this shit. No, so now now we know that they can move correctly. Now we know they have the proper mobility. Now we know we're fixing different asymmetries. And then when they come into our program with our vets, we already know what their strength levels are. So now we can get them as strong as possible with our off-season program within the 3 to 4 weeks we have in the spring. And then when we hit that 9 weeks in the summer and we throw them into what we're talking about right now, as soon as those guys hit that whatever we feel is strong enough for that individual athlete, and it was like, hey, listen, for example, Denzel Butler just took the starting nickel position for us, and it's a struggle getting him to squat heavy whenever it's time to hit that max effort. But he is so doggone explosive, and for his body frame, he is so doggone strong that I came into this summer, I looked at him, I said, hey, I don't care how much you squat. You're 80 pound cornerback. You squat over 400 pounds. We're gonna work on making sure every single weight that's on your sheet, we're gonna move it as fast as humanly possible. That's all I want. I want perfect technique, and I want you to move that weight as fast as humanly possible. And just by me telling him that, oh, coach, I can do that shit. I can do that. All right, cool. Show me. Prove it. Hook up a tendo. He was on one of the first racks. Hook up a tendo. Hey, perfect technique. Sit back. Make sure your knees are out. Make sure you're bracing and breathing. Make sure you have good posture down in the hole, and get up as fast as you can. That guy increased every single one of his lifting totals this summer. Every single one, just by me telling him, like, hey, I think you're fast. I think you're strong enough. So since I think you're strong enough, we're going to try to move the weight as fast as you can. And that alone created a competition within that rack of him, Dede, Caleb, and that referred over to the next rack with Jaquavis, Lockett, and then came across the weight room to our starters, to where JG and Geyser were trying to move their weight as fast as you can, and then boom, that's exactly what we just wrote up on the board.
Yeah.
Because Geyser is our strongest lifter on the clean with a 338 power clean at safety. And now he's moving as fast as he can. And then he went up this summer. He broke his record twice from the record he broke last year.
I think the most important thing out of that is intent, and as you guys all agree, like, just having the intent for speed is so essential to coach, because they've done a ton of research, and even like that's, I think, with the NFL guys was the most important thing that Green said, like, us hooking the 10 meters up there, we had to, because all those guys were elite in nature. Isaiah Williams, who would squat 550 like it was butter. He always wanted more weight, but we always had to cool him down, and we would ask for more speed. And I think that was what was so different. Even they just published a study. What do they call it? The rugby team in New Zealand, the Black
All Blacks.
The All Blacks. So they published a study there where they took, don't quote me on exactly the methods of the study, but they took half of them and they had them do their squat jumps on a tendo unit, and they took half of them and just had them do basic squat jumps. And the group that had a tendo unit, just because it increased their intent to move the bar fast, they had a significant increase in their vertical jump compared to the opposite group. And that's the exact same training, the exact same percentages, just by coaching intent. And that's why, one of my big things I tell everyone to coach with is when we bench press, what are we going to say? Speed. When we're out of the hole on a squat, what are we going to say? Speed. When we're about to pull power clean, what are we going to say? Speed. So that's our thing. But there's so much research and studies out there about just coaching intent for speed and just how that affects. And I think that pushes you more in that optimal zone of what I'm talking about. Like I said, we're not training powerlifters, and maybe speed wouldn't be the best thing to tell a powerlifter to do when he's got 1,000 pounds on his back. But for us, that keeping that intent being speed, and do we really want our guys moving a bar at 0.25 meters per second? Like, do we really want that grind, that cut? So I think those are the big things we really took from those NFL guys. That's really big. And then, so I was like, Sowers had me thinking about everything he was talking about yesterday, and I told you guys he's like who got me like really thinking and studying about the CNS back when he was my first boss, so I just called him this morning and I was like, dude, we were talking about this yesterday, so I was like, 'cause I remembered him talking about that he was going to switch to Prilipin's chart. And now they got fired that year, but he was, for wintertime, he was planning on switching that. If you guys don't know what that is, Prilipin trains Olympic athletes only, professional weightlifters. And so his percentages are freaking high as shit. So I was thinking about that, like, since Sowers talked to us, like, I'm like, damn, like, now that I remember, like, you did always preach, like, lower percentages and stuff in CNS, but then you were about to switch to one of the most heavily taxing workouts. So I called him and I asked him this morning, I was like, what were you doing? Like, what were you thinking? And he's like, I was going to use that template, but he said, I took 10% off of everything. So if he called for 95%, I was using 85%. If he called for 90, I was using 80. If he called for 88, I was using 78. And then, he's the big thing that I'm kind of saying, and what I'm definitely, I'm at the point where I'm like all bought in on this is, he's like, my biggest thing was every time we hit 5x5, and even if it was on a working week, like that fifth set should be a grind. It should be tough, but that when you get done, you rack that fifth rep, you should be able to compete for a 6th rep if you wanted to. We're not going to hit it, but you should be able to compete for it. And like I said, and everything kind of points in the direction of that. Like, he's like, Mike, I'd get pissed if my guys were failing. Like, if we did a 3x3, like, those dudes shouldn't be dropping the bar on the racks. He's like, the only time my guys failed, if I prescribed 2 repetitions and they could only get 1, that was my mess up. It was something that I knew they should be getting those. He said the only time maybe is during a performance week. So how he programmed is in 4-week blocks. He said he would do, a deload, a base week, a progression week, and then a performance week. And that's kind of when he would let him, quote unquote, eat. But that was super interesting. When I was talking to him this morning about that stuff, it was just like, you go through a 4-week cycle with him, you're not gonna ever fail. And and like I said, the performance weeks are the only weeks he lets him climb. So like, even if it's what I was talking to you about the other day, like, he would always cut them off even if they were feeling good. The performance weeks are the weeks that he would let them eat. So if they were feeling really good, he'd say, okay, you can go for as much as you want today. And obviously he would cap it, and he would tell them. So if Green hit 500, and then hey, I'll call you right back. Okay. If Green was hitting 500 and killing it, he said the only time guys would fail is if I guessed and said, you should hit 530 next, and I made a poor judgment. But other than that, he's like, my dudes weren't ever feeling. And I was just like, yeah, no, that's right. That's how it should be. So that's not necessarily has anything to do with what we're talking about right now, but I just thought that was super. And I just talked to him this morning about that stuff based off what we talked about last week. I thought that was very interesting.
Go ahead.
Well, it's on off of what you said with Denzel, how once when you told him you wanted him to go with the speed and everything, because he can you thought that he could do it. I think it has to do a lot with the internal and external motivation, because you just said it was a domino effect that all the other guys were feeding off of his motivation and him being able to do it. And so that also goes, I think, with the developmental, how with the attitudes with the guys, that I think it's really important with what you're saying, Sleeve, how the guys shouldn't graduate if they have a bad attitude, because if they have a bad attitude, they're not going to educate themselves on the importance of all this, and if they don't have the knowledge, then they're not going to have the motivation to do everything, and then the whole cycle is ruined. So I think even simple things like attitude and motivation, internal and external, are so important, and I think the players are missing that. And we're trying with everything, but a lot of them don't care. So I think it's just other things like that, details like that also are important to pay attention to.
What Green didn't tell you too is that he would almost get in a fist fight with Denzel at least every other week.
Man, listen, you don't have to say, God damn.
You know, it's
Hey, I had to motivate. I did. Hey, listen.
He made it all sound like Rose. Sorry, but
I did. Hey,
you'd also hear every other week. Oh, you don't want to squat today? You don't want to squat today?
hey, motivation is a motherfucker. So if I have to do that, I'm motivating somebody to get up under the bar. Getting up under the bar, you have to get up under the bar to know this stuff.
That wasn't just one conversation. It was
multiple.
But I mean,
But you need it.
It is squatting sucks. It just does. You know, from a guy that's as long as I am, I can tell you that squatting is not fun when you have to have a mentality to get under the bar. But that's like practicing to me. Like, you know, nobody wants to practice every day. I don't care what you say. And that was the hardest thing for me with college football was like I said, you're sitting there in class, it's snowing outside, it's December, and you're watching that shit all day out the window, knowing that at 3:15 you got practice. And like to be able to strap it up, put your helmet on, know you got to go violently hit somebody and strike somebody. Like it takes an ability to flip a switch.
Yeah.
And it sucks. And that's the worst piece of it in my opinion. But that's what squatting is. Like so many days you walk in this weight room and it just happens to fall on a squat day. And you do not want to do. And the last thing you want to do is put a bar on your back. And that ability to force yourself to figure that out, like that's a very special ability to have or to motivate someone to do, but they have to have the ability to do it. If you can't motivate someone to get their mind right to squat, they don't have a chance in hell in the sport because it is such to me a direct correlation to being able to strap it up and go out and play, practice in whatever weather it is, whatever the situation is. So I think that's yeah. I mean, you're damn right. That's a big time thing. That's freaking life too, you know.
Yeah,
So
that's everything.
If we go, man, this is probably another topic. But if we actually go into that, like having that intensity, having that mind frame, everything you just said about with practice and the bar and even the intensity that you bring, like as coaches. And we had this talk about the tricks and the trade and everything. You have to have an intensity. Like when we're outside of this weight room, our conversations are totally different. But as soon as we get into this weight room, that switch is flipped, and I expect the athletes to have this flip switched as well. And when switch, flip, switch.
it's okay. I messed up the force equation.
We all messed up. It's okay.
Yeah.
But when you get up under that bar, you have to have the intent and the expectation that you're going to dominate that weight. And for me, like, so if you look at, like, athlete A would be, I'm sorry, athlete A would be what? Would be me.
That'd be you.
Athlete A would be me. Athlete B would be Sleeve. So when it's time for me to get up under the bar, and like for today, I think I have 5'10" on my workout for.
You said this was you, right, Green?
Oh,
I'm just kidding. What's your squat, Coach Green, so I can give you a shout out right now?
655.
655. I'm gonna bump this up, Coach. I'm gonna say you're at least going 315.
Oh, I appreciate it. But yeah, so like today, like I'm on my workout having 5'10" for 5. When we get out of here, I have to flip a switch to get up under the bar and get that. But when Sleeve goes, he's gonna hit that platform. And he's moving 264, then there 3 blues at max speed, and I can't even pick that up and get it up to my chest, and let alone get in the rack position. So, and that's where it is. But having that doggone intensity, and knowing that you have to get after it, and knowing that when I get ready to train, like with Sleeve, my CNS is going to get hit hard. And if Sleeve wanted to come over and train with me,
That just wouldn't happen. I get stapled to the floor.
but if Sleeve wanted to come over and train with me, his CNS is going to get hard. So knowing how to coach those guys, how to motivate those guys, and knowing that we're going to get every single thing out of them, and knowing that they're going to need the time to recover so they can come back and do it again, like we have to know that and know that they're getting taxed. It's the same stuff with the CNS that he was talking about earlier. Go straight back to the force velocity that we've been talking about. And it's also going to knowing your athletes.
Yeah.
It all correlates together. You all have to work together about that.
What if the athletes, like, I'm not going to say names specifically, but you all know the ones that when we turn our backs, they just stop. What do you do about that, really?
Don't turn it back.
Yeah, well, I mean, in the day, it don't matter what you do, because there's 22 hours outside of this place, and that's why we talk about the house or so much. It's not about we can make these kids do whatever we want to. I can put these kids on the line and make them do 1,000 up downs if I wanted to. It's about making them want to do it, and that's what really good coaches do. So when I have an athlete that I know doesn't like it in here, that's fine. They don't have to like it in here. You have to motivate them to want to be in here, to whyever it's important to them. If you have to explain to them from a team aspect, from an individual success aspect, you have to figure out a way, because if that kid's dropping every time you turn his back, it ain't about you turning around and catching him. It's about you intrinsically finding a way to make that kid want to do it, or else for 4 years you're gonna be fighting that same battle. If the kid hates squatting, if all you do is try to give him a fish every time instead of teaching him how to fish, every single time you go to put a squat, but you're gonna have that same argument every single time. It's about, you have to teach him, you have to motivate him why to squat to depth. Man, coach, it sucks when I squat to depth. It's so much harder. It is so much harder. But that's how you activate your hamstrings. If you don't activate your hamstrings, you become quad dominant. If you're quad dominant, guess what you're gonna hurt? Yeah, you're gonna pull something. You're never gonna play football, so you don't want that. So why don't we lighten the weight? Let's get you on the full depth and let you strong, because that's where you faster. What's your 40 goal? Oh, you want to run a 4.4? Okay, you got to squat full depth. If not, no dice.
Yeah.
Then all of a sudden you hear them telling other people that same thing. So, dude don't want to do it. You have to convince them not to do what you want them to do, but convince them to want to do what you want them to do.
What's that that quote? What is it? Coaching is teaching, and
Coaching is teaching. Coaching is teaching. Teaching is motivating people to want to learn. Word. Yeah. And by the way, since I gave Harris a shout out for thinking about the daily shred, this whole curriculum idea started from Coach Green when he asked me about 18 months ago, just one random day, and we were doing a staff development, and he was like, "Why don't you videotape this stuff? This stuff is brilliant." And I said, "Yeah, that's a great idea," and then we just didn't do it. I think that was kind of like extra work and stuff. But anyways, so
we videotaped
like a year later down the road, I was just sitting there and I was like, "Yeah, let's start videotaping this stuff." But that idea stemmed from Coach Green about almost 2 years ago. So
I love this.
there's Coach Green's shout out right there.
I love this shit.
Yeah. Just so nobody's confused, because I don't remember exactly what I said, but now I do remember messing up, just so everyone knows this. Okay, force equals
Mass
acceleration times acceleration, okay? I think I might have slaughtered that earlier. What I was trying to tell you guys was what strength is, which is what Coach Harris quoted. Strength is untimed. Force is not, however. If it's untimed, then you're missing a whole piece of your equation there. So just so you guys know that. All right, any other questions, comments, anything? No, we're good. Good. All right. So like I said, y'all, we're gonna call it our daily shred. If you want to get on, and we probably won't. Maybe we'll videotape some, probably not all of them. If you want to get on them, we'll just do an email list, and then Coach Harris will email you the daily shreds that we're gonna do when we do them, and we might not even necessarily meet like this on all of them, but definitely gonna read all about them all. So if you want to get on the email list, like I said, email ironzips@gmail.com, and we'll just create a big daily shred email list, and we'll just send these out to you as we do them, so we can keep you on board with that. Let's see if I can get this right. Give us this day our daily shred, and forgive us our weaknesses as we forgive those with skinny ass necks. Mic drop.